I believe that's enough modeling for one day. You can leave now. Frescoes painted by Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci are recognized the world over, bound not only by plaster and pigment to this earth, but by the minds of the faithful as the defining images of Christ and God. Like the deities they've given to the world a face, they too have achieved a note of immortality, as their names still resonate as masters almost 500 years after their deaths. In the Sistine Chapel, all one must do is look towards the heavens to behold the face of God in the creation of Atom. But to the keen observationist, one might detect a note of the sinister lurking within these radiant beings. As noted by a dear friend, I'll call only Ford. Within the painting, The Creation of Atom, God and his angels form the shape of the human brain. Does this merely suggest intellect is a gift bestowed upon man by a higher power? Or that a higher power is only the creation of intellect? In layman's terms, a figment of the imagination. Much like art itself, faith is entirely subjective. And on that note, welcome back, my children of rot. For those who follow me, you of course realize that I too have been creating the likenesses of deities, those with faces better left unseen. But of course, it is my duty to bridge the gap between your world and ours, to introduce you, the unwitting, to the forces that are and will always be. The subjects of Michelangelo and Da Vinci may even criticize or disparage my work, accusing them of being graven images, false idols. To that, I will say only this: no business likes competition. Damned Catholics. I would be a fool to not appreciate the work of Michelangelo and Da Vinci, but I am more inclined to appreciate and enjoy the work of my fellow dark dark artists. Those overlooked by the oh-so-pleasant social circles of softer artists today. No, Francisco Goya, William Blake, and more. They will not be forgotten, for I will not permit you to. Tonight I will tell you their stories, how they achieved their sinister visions and committed these vile thoughts to canvas. We might even touch on a few paintings that are so lifelike, they've taken on a life of their own. After all, what's the fun in discussing Pikmin without his models? So, darken the gallery, and we shall commence. You'll find two paintings prominently featured here in my parlor. Would you believe that they were removed from the walls of a dead lunatic's home? They come to us from the ominously named La Quinta del Sordo, the House of the Deaf Man. Deaf he may have been, but to see these paintings, we can hear the dry, hoarse cackle of witches at Sabbath, the wailing of phantoms, and perhaps the whisper of a Faustian bargain. These works, dubbed the Black Paintings, were never meant for public scrutiny. No, they were hidden away and never mentioned by their artist. His name was Francisco Goya. Goya was once highly sought after. His talents were commissioned by dukes and duchesses, King Charles III of Spain, and was even appointed court painter of Charles IV, providing him a very handsome salary. Despite the constrictions portrait work may suggest, we still can find a taste of the bitter in these pieces. However, his madness began when he lost his hearing in 1793 from an undiagnosed illness. Though he physically could not hear, he made mention often to his friends that he still could, but only inside his head. His work made a noticeable and sudden shift. He began his Los Capricos. Makes you wonder what those voices only he could hear were saying. This was quickly followed by Yard with Lunatics, and his series The Disasters of War, inspired by the horrors of Napoleon. Talented fellow. Goya never made clear his intentions with this series, but art critics often flatter themselves with their own opinions. I have spoken with the voices in his head. They suggest they simply found the work amusing. As he grew older, his nervous breakdown continued, and his bitterness more unrelenting. He hid away from the society he grew to despise in an isolated farmhouse, not unlike the one in which I live. This was to become the La Quinta del Sordo, where countless hours were spent painting the walls in sinister visions. In 1828, he decided to retire, and that same year he died. He lives on today as a man of mystery, known the world over as the man who gave evil a face. It certainly was no coincidence that he died the same year he retired. As I stated before, the voices that only Goya could hear still exist. They still whisper. Perhaps you're an artist. Tell me, can you hear them? In Bun Hill Field's burial grounds, you'll find the earthly remains of William Blake, world-famous poet, author, and artist. This cemetery is just outside the perimeter of London, a literal outsider cemetery, a place to inter those with unorthodox religious views. Blake indeed tailored his own doctrines, a modern heretic that lived by his own rules, a good-natured Aleister Crowley, if you will. He was the consort of alchemists and magicians, an advocate for loose morals, and studied ancient texts on forbidden gods. Blake claimed to have visions of the supernatural since his early youth. As a boy, he said the face of God peered through his window, sending him into uncontrollable fits, and that angels made themselves known in the branches of trees near his home. As he grew older, his visions were the product of what he referred to as a religious trance. These he could enter at will. In 1819, Blake began performing nightly seances, accompanied by his friend and fellow painter, John Varley. The two summoned not only souls lost to time, but creatures of myth and legend. The subjects that chose to bleed through the veil, Blake committed to canvas. These proved so bizarre that critics thought Blake to have been committed to an insane asylum. Among his models you'll find the goddess of witchcraft, Hecate, Nebuchadnezzar, the fallen king of Babylon, Satan himself, and of course, the Red Dragon. My favorite, however, is the ghost of a flea. Blake said late one evening, just after a seance, he saw the figure standing in the doorway to his garden. Beneath the moonlight was the hulking monster, its scaly shoulders heaving with breath, and its eyes 2 pinpoints of hellfire. Blake said the creature was the literal ghost of a flea. He believed that fleas were the reincarnated souls of bloodthirsty murderers, relegated and doomed to life as tiny, inconsequential things. For if they were the size of horses, they would destroy us all. Can you too see the rage in its eyes, as its winding tongue laps up every drop of blood? Blake, being a poet, wrote a small poem. This he used to enter his trance-like state just before his seances. If you're feeling brave, the poem is as follows. O rose, thou art sick, the invisible worm that flies in the night, and the howling storm has found out thy bed of crimson joy, and the dark secret, love, does life destroy. What of paintings themselves, though? Can they not possess a life all their own, like the portrait of Dorian Gray, the essence of evil bound within a frame, forever marring the world in which they dwell? Zdzisław Beskiński was a deeply troubled Polish artist and sadomasochist who referred to his paintings as photographing dreams. Curious. His works often focused on death and decay, subjects the artist seemed obsessed by. He refused to title his pieces, as he claimed that not even he knew exactly what they meant. Perhaps he suffered a sinister influence like our friend Goya. It was said he'd awake late at night in a cold sweat, compelled to paint what his nightmares had showed him. He was even seen burning a number of these paintings in his backyard. A preemptive strike that came too late, as tragedy was soon to follow. Doesn't it always? The artist's wife died from an undiagnosed illness, and that following year their son committed suicide. In 2005, left all alone, Beksinski was brutally stabbed to death in his own home. Since his murder, his paintings are said to have a strange effect on those who see them. The viewers may become entranced, unable to break away from the artist's depictions of rot. They claim to even see the figures within the paintings move. Bad luck, troubled thoughts, and bad dreams are only a few of the side effects said to occur in the fallout. In the 1970s, a rash of fires broke out across England. Homes were burnt to a cinder. Investigators were left baffled, as they could never find a reasonable source for the inferno. Each time, however, in the midst of charred belongings, a single painting was found unscathed. Mass-produced by a printing company in the 1950s, The Crying Boy made its way to walls in homes across the country. Peculiar home decor indeed. Its artist, Giovanni Braccolini, had a number of aliases and painted several portraits of sobbing children. A rumor alleges the subjects were all from the same orphanage that burnt to the ground with its young occupants trapped inside, their vengeful spirits wiping out happy homes. Steve Punt, a British writer and comedian, took it upon himself to investigate this phenomenon. He discovered that the paintings were treated with fire-resistant lacquers. What he failed to explain is why the company would only treat these paintings. In that event, wouldn't every painting from this company be left unscorched? Edvard Munch is best known for his sinister painting The Scream. He is also responsible for an arguably more chilling painting. The dead mother depicts a child unable to grasp the magnitude and weight of its own mother's death. Crying can be heard near the painting, accompanied with the mother's final gasps for breath and a rustling of her bed linens. The child's desperate eyes are said to follow the viewer, begging for rescue that never comes. You may think these viewers are simply being imaginative, losing themselves in an artist's work. Tell that to the gentleman who saw Ilya Repkin's painting of Ivan the Terrible murdering his son. Upon its unveiling, the public in attendance was shocked, but none more than one man. In 1913, a man by the name of Abram Balashov saw the painting and promptly withdrew a pocket knife. He began screaming amidst the panicked art lovers, "Stop the bloodshed! Stop the bloodshed!" plunging his blade into the painting's faces. Abram was carted off to an asylum, from which he never left. The curator of the art gallery was so distraught by what he had allowed to happen that he threw himself beneath a passing train. In 2018, a nameless visitor claimed to be overcome by something, a force he cannot explain. He promptly grabbed a metal pole used to rope off the exhibit and bashed the painting's glass case to bits, targeting again the face of its subjects.
Oh, knock, knock. Oh, hello, Mr. Spooky. Hello, children of the rot.
Good evening, Dr. Seltsam. I'm so pleased you could find time in your busy schedule to join us here this evening.
Since your show has come back, we have been absolutely overwhelmed at the funeral home. We've had so many murders, we've mixed the wrong pieces in the wrong caskets. There have been 12 shootings, 9 axe murders, 10 stabbings, 1 incident with a pogo stick, and even 2 suicides.
Well, I suppose we can't please them all now, can we? At least there was no natural causes. Good grief. Now that would be really embarrassing.
I dialed up the air conditioning before we left, so I've got all the time in the world. Besides, I'm glad to be here for my one and only return customer. What's that you're doing there?
Oh, I'm just putting the finishing touches on a new piece.
Oh, very nice, self-portrait. Well, that doesn't surprise me in the slightest.
Yes, I know. I'm a man of so many talents.
Oh, well, no. I mean in the sense that most artists are indeed mentally ill. Undiagnosed madness often shows through the artist's canvas. Take, for instance, Louis Vane. He was a popular artist known for his amusing paintings of wide-eyed kitty cats in social settings, playing cards, smoking, drinking, being all so naughty. His work made a sudden and radical shift. The kitties were suddenly abstract, almost, as the young people say, psychedelic. Neon abstract designs became his forte. The reason why, you ask? Well, it was later determined that Louis was schizophrenic. You previously mentioned Edvard Munch.
How do you know that?
Edvard Munch suffered a mental breakdown in 1908 and was committed to an insane asylum in Denmark. His family history was already plagued with madness, as his sister was schizophrenic and his father a bipolar depressive. His madness is thought by art critics to be captured in his brush strokes. His most famous piece, The Scream, was inspired by auditory and visual hallucinations. Van Gogh, or as you Americans insist on saying Van Gogh, famous piece Starry Night was a painting he did depicting the view from his room in an asylum. In fact, he was quoted as saying, "I put my heart and soul into my work and lost my mind in the process." He was diagnosed as suffering with bipolar disorder, anxiety, and depression. His madness reached a peak in 1888. Suffering with dementia, he threatened a fellow artist with a razor. Ultimately, he turned the blade on himself, severing his left ear. He documented this with a bandaged self-portrait. It is believed that Van Gogh took the severed ear, wrapped in a handkerchief, and gave it to a prostitute in a brothel he frequented. Posthumously, Van Gogh has achieved the critical acclaim he deserves, and his work is much sought after. Collectors are ravenous for mementos, why even the gun he used to kill himself recently sold at auction for over $180,000.
Just to be clear, we here at Tales of Midnight do not condone or advocate suicide.
Oh, Mr. Spooky, what's gotten into you? Are you trying to put me out of work? Of course, I don't suggest suicide, but, just in case. Until next time, children of Zerot, remember to analyze and dissect all facets of life. And your friends at Seltsam's funeral home will be there to clean it up.
Farewell, Dr. Seltz. Have a good night. Take care.
You are Seltsam.
Send my love to the missus. Bye-bye now.
I will, Mr. Spooky.
Bye-bye. And on that note, kitties, I think we've painted quite the picture for you this evening. But that's enough madness, murder, and mayhem for one night. I do hope you enjoyed our little journey into the night gallery. For tomorrow, you could be our next portrait subject of interest. Only time can tell for certain, but if I were you, I would err on the side of caution. And as always, remember me as you scroll by. If you liked our show, then please subscribe. As we are now, so you must be. Prepare for death and follow me.